Hello, my name is Matthew Savage. I'm the author of The Secrets of a Good Teacher, How to Create an Educational Team in Your Classroom. A special shout out to my former students from Selma, Parlier, and Sanger. Hi, it is me. I wrote this book because so many teachers struggle with trying to control their students. I've created a different concept, and that is you create a team in your classroom and get them to engage in the educational process. I hope you watch this video and enjoy it. Thank you very much. For years, I've seen competent teachers struggle in the classroom. I wrote The Secrets of a Good Teacher to create a template for these teachers so they could create educational teams in their own classrooms and have the success that every teacher really does want. We have our students put their hands over their hearts and say, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Really what that is a team, a democracy. But how many times have we given our students a chance to see a democracy in action? Most of the teachers go into the classroom trying to control their students, and control is a dictatorship. And in a dictatorship, it's you, the teacher, against your students. You may control your students, but education really doesn't take place. When I first started teaching, I started looking for some clues from really good teachers, how they actually created an educational environment in their own classrooms. I searched, all I could find was snippets of little things that they did that they said they claimed helped them in their endeavors. Freedom Riders is a perfect example. I love that movie. But that teacher was taken in by the board and asked a couple years after she created the Freedom Riders and asked if she could recreate that same environment in a classroom, and she said, I don't know. I was able to create educational teams, and I have documented it in the book, The Secrets of a Good Teacher. I started my teaching career at a high school in the Valley, teaching at-risk math students, people who are having a lot of trouble passing math, and coaching. In the classroom, I tried to control the 40 students per period that I had. But on the field, I was coaching. I was creating a team atmosphere. I liked what was happening in the athletic field. I wasn't real happy with what was happening in the classroom, so I started taking some of those things that I had used in my athletic teams, and I started to put them into my classroom. And I did start having enough success that the science department the following year asked me to teach at-risk students in a human biology class that they had created for students, again, who were having trouble passing science. As the years went on, I put more and more effort into creating teams, and it was recognized by the union, who asked me to become the vice president of the union. There were some policies that I didn't like, and as a vice president, I started trying to change those. I quickly found out something. School boards and superintendents create policies. They are given to administrators, and those administrators administrate those policies to the teachers who are supposed to follow those policies. As a teacher, you cannot change policy. And if you do, you will end up being very frustrated. If you want to change policy, you have to run for the school board. After 6.5 years, I did end up quitting teaching. I went into the business field, and I became a manager of a corporation, a branch of a corporation. I took the same team building skills that I had used in the classroom, and I transferred those over into my workforce of truck drivers and warehouse people, and it worked exactly the same, except for a few tweaks, because of course these were adults and it was a union shop. I did end up running for the school board, and what we did was we put the right people in positions of authority, and in doing so we changed the whole environment of the district. I only was on the school board for 4 years, but when I got off the school board, I followed the school. And on the 3rd year, the teaching staff brought a plaque in to the superintendent that read, Superintendent of the Universe. that superintendent had changed the whole atmosphere of the district, that filtered down to the teachers, that filtered down to the students, which is exactly who I wanted to help in the first place. After 22 years, our branch of the corporation was closed, and so at 53, I was back in the world of unemployment. So I applied for and got a job at a junior high school teaching. Initially, I was an opportunity teacher, but they quickly moved me into the classroom to teach pre-algebra and to coach. I enjoyed those students a lot, but what I really was surprised at was the coaching at the junior high school level. I never coached at that level before. And because they had no experiences whatsoever, we had tremendous improvement that I never had in any athletic group that I ever coached. So it's something to think about if you want to get into coaching. There was a position opened at a high school for a biology teacher in another district. I applied and got that job. 3.5 years after I got that job, I was nominated for Teacher of the Year for Fresno Tulare County. I used the same techniques that I'd used 22 years previous with the new students that I had, my biology students at the high school, and it worked exactly the same. I'm saying this because kids haven't changed. Kids are the same. What I noticed in the 22-year absence of teaching is that parents and teachers have changed, not the students. The 4th year I was at the school, I developed cancer, and I had to leave the area for the air quality. On the last day of school, my AP biology students presented me with a plaque that read, "Dear Mr. Savage, you answered all our questions with ease. You wanted A's and B's and we gave you C's. You're the best teacher that I've ever had. To most of us, you were like a dad." What state education code says, which is the law for schools, is that you are a parent on site in loco parentis. You have the same rights as a parent does over the children that you're responsible for. What it really should say is you have the rights, but you also have the obligation to treat these kids with respect and to nurture them the same you would your own children. But it doesn't. Teaching techniques. There are various teaching techniques. One, of course, obviously, that I've used it is control. And of course, if you try to control your students, then eventually you have to intimidate them. Some teachers go further with sarcasm, and they also use physical threats. None of these things really work well. You may have control, but the educational process is stymied. There are teachers who are entertainers, and that does work. I've seen that work with many teachers, except you have to have very thick skin, because many times teachers are laughed at and not with. And if you don't have thick skin, then you might revert back to control and intimidation, and everything that you built, it disappears. The worst one, of course, is grading by behavior. You give A's to your really good students, nice students. You give C's to the kids who don't cause you too many problems, and you flunk the kids who give you a lot of problems. No learning takes place in this atmosphere. Using and creating educational teams is a much better way to present information to your students. Understanding social dynamics. People have long understood and recognized moral differences in groups. Martin Luther King said from the Birmingham jail, wrote from the Birmingham jail in 1963, "We will have to repent for the words and acts of the children of darkness, but also for the fear and apathy of the children of light." He recognized two different groups, children of darkness, children of light. Sounds like a Star Wars episode, but he forgot one group. In the movie, American Sniper, Chris Kyle, who was the American Sniper. He got in a fight when he was younger and is in school, and he was kicked out, so his father called him in and he gave him a Texas adage, and that was, there are three kinds of people. There's wolves, there's sheep, and there's sheepdogs. Which one are you? And Chris replied, my brother was being bullied and I protected him. And he said, a sheepdog, don't ever be a wolf. There's many other examples in history, but in my observations, I created a hypothesis that seemed to follow what was happening in my classrooms and in my workplace. And that was that 7% of all the kids in my classroom were wolves. They were bullies, and if they ever got a foothold in my classroom, they would create chaos. 15%, give or take, were really moral kids, really great kids. When I walked in the classroom, they wanted me to succeed. They wanted to learn. And then 78%, they were sheep. They were followers. What does this mean to you as a teacher? Well, the followers basically are an important group because they understand right and wrong. They just have to be reminded by you as the teacher what is right and wrong. When I walked in the classroom the first time with 40 children, I thought I was going to have to control all 40 of these children. What the reality was is I really only had to negate the behavior of 7% of those students. 7% of 40 is 3, little math. So just 3, any teacher can negate bad behavior of 3 children. When you started to negate the behavior, you negate just the behavior. You don't attack the child. And what students will do is you will bring in 93% of the children on your side and you negate the 7%. I remember an incident coming into a class and I wasn't feeling good, and of course the wolves see weakness, and he started to disrupt, and I looked at him and I said, don't do it, you know what's going to happen. And it was like a deer in the headlights look from this young man, and he just stood there for a second, and one of my students, one of my children of light, reached over and grabbed him and said, stop it. And when you get a student to interact with their peers and tell them their behavior is unacceptable, that is way more powerful than I could. He sat down and we went back to work. What you're trying to do with your students is modify behavior. You're modifying not only the student's behavior, but in many cases you must and have to modify your own behavior. So what do students, in my observation, what do they think a good teacher should be like? Be kind. Kindness is not weakness. Greg Boyle, who was a priest, created Homeboy Industries. And Homeboy Industries was created to give jobs for people who were coming out of prison and or drug addicts who couldn't get jobs. And he made a statement that resonates with me very strongly, that is, you cannot scare them straight, you have to care them straight. When you discipline a young person in your class, discipline the behavior. Do not discipline the student. Do not attack him personally. The kids will appreciate this a lot. And another very difficult thing to do is don't take this personally. When bad behavior occurs and it stops, it's over. You don't hold a grudge. You don't take it personally. You go back to education, and that's what you're trying to do. And be respectful of these kids. It's not hard to do to say thank you and please, and ask them, and reinforce good behavior and negate bad behavior. And students will eventually come into your room with you. Okay, this is where actually I would stop because it's been 10 minutes and most students can't concentrate longer. Most people cannot. So I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay, here comes the real good stuff. Okay, discipline plan, the templates you can use in your classroom to help create educational teams. If you find disruptive behavior, You say that this behavior is unacceptable and it has to stop. Sometimes that will get students to stop, sometimes it won't. Usually when I made that statement, the class would stop talking and wait to see what was going to happen. If the student did not stop the bad behavior, then I would step in and say, okay, if you don't stop the bad behavior, I'm going to have to remove you from class, and your parents must come in order for you to get back in this class. And I'm going to tell them that you could have stopped this bad behavior at any time and you chose not to. The important thing that you need to do if you do this is make sure your word is your bond. Do not bluff them. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And students watch you, and if they see that your word is your bond, if you say you're going to do something and do it, they will start to believe you, and you need them to do that. Parent conferences, ooh. Parent conferences really aren't scary because you've set this up correctly. When the parent comes in, you introduce yourself, and you say, I'm really not mad at your child, but his behavior or her behavior is unacceptable and it has to change because it's interrupting the educational process. Now you've set it up. Now that seems indefensible, but in many cases, one of the parents will try to defend the bad behavior. What I began to notice early is the child that you remove from class is a mini-me of one of the parents. You are what you see. So the parent is just defending the behavior that they would accept. Because you can continue the conversation, it's almost indefensible, and one of the parents almost always will step up and say, this is wrong. This has to stop. Can't do this. And look to the student, their child, and say, you can't do this in class. Then many times they would have them apologize to me. And when it was done, I would tell them, okay, we're done, everything is good, everything goes back to normal. I thank them for coming in, and we go back to the way it was. When the child comes in, I would usually wait at the door, and I would let the child come in, and I would stop and say, you know, everything is fine, right? We resolved the problem, and I don't hold grudges. And that would always stun the student, and they would look at me and usually give me a smile, and we'd go right back to the way things were, no hard feelings. In promoting the book, I went to 12 schools, and one of the counselors asked me a very good question. What were you hoping to achieve by writing this book? What I was hoping is, by introducing this book into the school districts, is that there would be a brave administrator who would look at this as an alternative to controlling their students or whatever they were trying to do. Let those people who wanted to try this new way of creating teams, try it. I was hoping maybe in 12 schools I would get 12 teachers. Well, you have 200 kids in your sphere every year. 200 times 12 is 2,400 kids. So the more kids the more teachers I could get involved in this program, the more kids that would have an opportunity initially to see a democracy, a team. And a lot of kids have never seen that and never participated in the educational process. Also, education is a foundation for a great democracy. The better the education, the stronger the democracy. Because an educated person, student becomes an adult, and they're harder to fool if they're educated. Things are really not going that well in education when 1.2 million students drop out every year, and most teachers only last 5 years in the profession. There needs to be an alternate program to try to see if we can stop that slide and get kids involved in the educational process. Soren Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. I saw this while I was writing the book, and I decided that that's only partially true. The truth is, if a teacher, before he got in the classroom, was given things to avoid, the negative portions of education to stay away from, and not get involved in, just going in your classroom and taking care of your students with tools that I've created, educational tools, that they could start creating educational teams the first day they got into school. It could change education, and it could change how teachers react with their students and how students react to their teachers. Every teacher wants to be a hero to their kids. Be a hero to your kids. I appreciate you listening to my little presentation. If you're interested in the book, it is available on Life Rich Publishing and Amazon. Again, thank you and good night.